All right. So I'm Stephen Coleman. You probably received like a lot of emails from me throughout the last few months marketing our different events that we have. I'm the co-director for the Faculty Development Center with Terry Bowles, who's out this week. And we thank you for coming to our panel discussion today on equity inclusion in the classroom. So I'll introduce our panelists in 1 second. Beforehand, I would like to introduce our Vice Provost. And Barb, would you like to come on up? Okay.
We're so excited that you're here and that we're starting to build the interest in the faculty center and the excitement about the faculty center. That's our real goal in here, is to provide things that will be useful for you in the classroom. And we're very excited that hopefully our new faculty center will be opening up in the fall. I've been told the date, but none of us believe it. So I'm in the fall. But we hope by then we'll have a really, really nice space for everybody to come. And we'll have space for these formal presentations, but also for you to come and hang out. So we're looking very forward to that. But I really want to thank Superintendent Melissa for the offerings that they've done this spring. It's just been amazing. We have one more speaker. Super's going to talk about that in a minute coming up. That we really hope everyone will come to. Thank you for our panelists, and we hope that you will continue to take advantage of all the things that we're offering. So thank you.
So we'll go ahead and get started with our discussion. I'd like to introduce our panelists today. We have Raquel, Malika, and Dan, and I'll give you a quick little bio on all of those individuals. Maybe. Okay. So we have Raquel Casas. Is it right? Okay. Yes. Who I can let her introduce herself.
I did in grade school. So I have been at UNLV now 22 years. I teach history and at one point I think I was the only Latina in the College of Liberal Arts. For 1 year I was like the only Latina in the College of Liberal Arts. So I have been here a while, and my area of specialization is borderlands history, 19th century California, ethnic marriage.
Sure. Buenas tardes. Buenas tardes. My name is Malika Conejo, and I am a doctoral student. I also live in the liminal space between becoming and being faculty and administrative staff. So I also work for the Office of Online Education as an embedded educational technologist, particularly with the Colleges of Hospitality and Business. I am focused on critical pedagogy, responsive teaching, multicultural education, and really honoring the funds of knowledge that students bring into the classroom as a point of entry to any content area. And so I also integrate some of my personal practice, which is healing, holistic healing, trauma-sensitive schooling practices in the classroom, and how to honor creating authentic assessments that really demonstrate academic growth over time. So delighted to be here with you all today.
My name is Dan Januchis. I'm Associate Dean of the Academic Success Center. I also teach our first year seminar called 100E, and some of my research interests revolve around student success, students and transition, and the difference between residential and commuter students. I also am involved in the faculty development program with the Faculty Center. In that role, I coordinate the faculty mentoring or faculty consultation program, the student to faculty observation program, and also the peer observation program. And I know a lot in this room have participated in those programs, so thank you very much.
Thank you. And we'll just go ahead and get started with our first question. So we just start and just go right down the road. So what does diversity mean for you in your teaching?
Right. Well, I think it's really important for us as teachers. So I use the term teachers broadly in terms of some of us are part-time instructors, some are tenured, some are in FER roles. Okay, but to the students, we're all the professor, right? And I think it's really important for us to understand the diversity of our students. And we're all really proud that we reached we're tied for the most diverse student undergraduate body in the U.S. by the U.S. World News ranking. Some other stats, proud to announce that UNLV, we're the first four-year institution in the whole state to reach enrollment of 25% or more Hispanic students. 61% of our students come from underrepresented races and ethnicities. 30% are first-generation students, okay? That's outstanding. And we dug a little deeper and we took a look at our freshman cohort, and 41.3% of our students are Pell eligible. So many of our students are coming from low-income backgrounds. And it's also been my experience in teaching, and of course there's people in the audience that have a lot more experience teaching than I do, but there's a range of our students, how they come in academically, right? So we have diversity in where they're coming at in that capacity. We see students underprepared in writing, underprepared in math. Okay, so these are some of the dynamics. So I think it's really important for us as teachers to really understand the diversity of our students and their multiple identities.
To me in the classroom, it's acknowledging the power of language. The power of language to create systems of power and dominance and subordination where some students may experience being marginalized, historically minoritized, and beginning as a conversation around what does diversity mean to us, because diversity without critical dialogue is simply a codified word that acknowledges a difference that exists. Yet the real challenge is how do we appreciate and value the differences that we all bring to the table? And that requires creating a safe space in the classroom, a brave space beyond safe, that allows students to express what lies beneath the cultural line of visibility, right? This means how are our values formed? What experiences have we had that give us some insight on the world around us, and what do we use to interpret the word and the world around us as a result? And so for me, diversity in the classroom means honoring the funds of knowledge my students come to me with. And that means that I have to save space in my curriculum in the first couple of days to do that, to learn my students and to learn that I also have power and positionality in the role that I have. And so acknowledging that as an instructor shifts the power dynamics in the classroom such that we can have these critical dialogues and conversations. So I'm delighted that we're beginning the series here. And I think I'll leave it for there right now.
I kind of take a dirty area approach to how I teach. Professors got to know their limitations. I may look like some of my students more than other professors. That does not mean I now have automatic influence. I need to always be self-conscious that I have limitations on what I know about them. So if they come in and assume things about me, I cannot assume things about them. And so that beginning idea of, oh, she looks different than a white male professor. But that does not mean that if she's a Latina, a student of Latina, that they share the same experience. No, age alone makes us different. Being the professor makes us different. And I have to be acknowledged what I can and what I am trying to do. I can make some assumptions that they are trying to learn, but in that big space, what I want them to learn and what they want to learn is the beginning of listening to them and trying to get to know them on their terms. But I have to also understand that if I try to be everything to everyone and I'm going to be the most diverse professor on the planet, it's not going to happen. So for me, it starts very much with what are my limitations? What are my biases? What am I expecting from my students? And knowing that that might cause conflicts for them. So for me, diversity in teaching is to start where what I do know and my limitations. And then as we grow into a class, and hopefully I can create that ability for everyone to speak. And that's, for me, that's the one thing that I do in all my classes. I tell all my students, they may not like it, but everyone is going to speak in my class. Because that is the most important question ever asked in the history of the world. What do you think? I know what I think, and I know how limited that is. But if I do not know what you think, then you're not going to have that space for learning. So for me, the first step to diversity is asking them that you, as an individual, that is the biggest power you will have in this world. To say, when someone asks you, and now believe me, I have nieces and nephews. When I ask them what they think, and they say, I don't know, it takes my sisters to stop me from slapping them. How can you not know? Tell me something. Because that means you're not thinking. And so for me, that's where I start. What do you think? And then we'll move from
A good colleague of mine at Dillard University says that part of her job in the classroom is to make sure that she provides a safe space, not a comfortable space. Because when learning really happens when students feel uncomfortable, at times. That happens through conversation, but she wants to make sure they're safe. So, just kind of understanding that, or just knowing how what the whole role is to develop students. How can instructors support the holistic development of UNLV's first students?
Okay, I can go ahead and start. I think it's developing the whole student is all of our role here at UNLV. And I really, when the University Undergraduate Learning Outcomes, we call them ULS for short, when they were rolled out, I really felt like they encompass developing the whole students. And those are global multicultural knowledge and awareness, critical thinking and inquiry, intellectual breadth and lifelong learning, and communication, citizenship, and ethics. And so I feel like that, to me, that sounds like we're working hard as a university as far as our learning outcomes and objectives to developing the whole student. I believe that faculty mentoring plays a huge role in students, as well as peer mentoring. And UNLV is soon going to be rolling out a real initiative for peer mentoring. But I think one thing that's really important is getting our students involved in campus. I think that's huge for developing them as a whole students. They can take leadership roles. They can they learn teamwork. They students from other backgrounds. So UNLV has 52 organizations, student club organizations, I should say, that are based on cultural, ethnic, or religious-based clubs and organizations. So get them involved here on campus, and it's perfect how we're right here in the student union, because it's a great place for them to start. Other things, travel abroad, and also I just was recently at the AAC&U conference, and it was a themed conference on diversity, equity, and student success. And some presenters, I believe they're from the Cal State system, but they highlighted that undergraduate research, okay, so there's all kinds of studies nationally that shows that students from lower SES backgrounds, first-generation students, transfer students, and students from underrepresented groups are more likely, or they have larger gains in benefiting from participating in undergraduate research. However, unfortunately, the numbers show that they're less likely to participate in or remain in undergraduate research. So, so how do we, create an environment, a welcoming environment? How can we amp up our professor and student mentoring and these type of areas, and create that sense of belonging where students feel more comfortable utilizing these types of services, and in return, they'll start to develop as a whole student.
All of our roles to encourage students to do so, especially on the campus.
I appreciate your comment, Dan, about the idea of ensuring a sense of belonging in the classroom. I think this is absolutely critical, right? For students who have been historically marginalized and minoritized, they already navigate what it feels like to have an imposter syndrome, right? To walk around campus and know that it is possible and probable that they will be treated differently by people in power and authority, period. It happens even to me, right, in my place of work. And I say that not because of my colleagues, but because of others that may come in and assume that I may have a different role than the role that I have. And so I think for me, the holistic development of students also involves like setting up the room differently, right? What does it feel like? What would it feel like for you all if we were in this session and we were sitting in a circle together? We were sitting, looking at each other, rehumanizing our human experience and acknowledging that we all have funds of knowledge, right, to share with each other, creating this community cultural wealth. And so shifting the space in the classroom to allow students to work collaboratively and teaching the process of what collaboration means. What does it look like? Offering them role cards, product cards. I think we take for granted that some of us have had more experience than others in working collaboratively and learning these skills that are essential soft skills, right, to be successful. So for me, the fundamental question, and I appreciate your question, Raquel, about what do I think the real question we need to get students to explore is, who am I? And that's a very different question. And we are often defined by what we do, what we say, but not who we truly are. And for young people, that is an essential part of understanding and their point of entry into their education and engagement in it. And so we hold space for exploring who we are as it relates to the content. As it relates to the content and how do we fit this in these critical conversations and dialogues with our peers so that we can break out of these silos, right? So we can learn from each other as well in the classroom. So I think it starts from shifting the classroom environment, right? All of these things, ensuring a sense of belonging and also holding space for exploring who we are.
For me, what do you think is success? Because we come in, oh, you're going to graduate with a degree in something, and that's success. Is it? What is it that you want, and what is it that you think makes you the person that you are in this process? And how is it that I can help? But what do you and where are you going? Are you taking what the university or society is telling you that you will be successful, that if you make a certain amount of money, you're automatically middle class and happy? You know, that isn't true, because everybody here is in middle class, and how many of you are really happy? So what is it that you are going to define as successful, and how is this university going to get you there? And it will, and so that, I think, again, so that they can say that we're interested. But many of our students, it's not just the university. They come bringing in family trauma, family obligations, family responsibilities, that they are one of a unit that they are constantly thinking about. And often that is finding their success. For Latino, almost, what is success? I want to make enough money to help my parents. That isn't that I'm going to be a doctor. I just want to help my parents. So right there, those economic concerns, when you're talking about, oh, now go and study abroad. When I was going to college, there was four siblings in college at the same time. If I would have gone to Europe in a second, but that meant my sister would have to do this, my brother would have to do this. I couldn't do that. So this idea of, what do we mean by holistic? Holistic to the individual, or holistic in how they see themselves in the pathway and the journey in their lives to get to where they want to go. And we have to be cognizant that they come in, many of them, with those economic burdens that makes them being students very different. So how do I help them try and carve their own individuality in that, and try to start thinking? But I also, given the background that I come from, that I know I can share with them, is exactly that. Okay, I know you feel responsible to your family. I know they want you to be successful economically, but education is one. So, how can I help you? Yeah, I'll help you get a job in any way I can. But what are the other things that I want you to do? And if I can help them get and study abroad, I will do it in a second. That's the one regret I have in my undergraduate. But I also understand if they come to me and say, I would love to. So if we really want to be holistic, it just can't be in the classroom is all I can deal with. They come in with those burdens that I know really do matter and might have an important impact in how they become.
Absolutely, love those points, especially on talking about knowing who you are and what success looks like. We all know success looks completely different to all of us. So having that understanding and building in curriculum or even opportunities for those individuals. I often joke that most times students go to college and only know about 10 different things that they can do in life anyway. It's not until they actually get there and they realize, oh, there's actually a field for this. So very on that So kind of with that, so understanding that, I think you brought up a great, comment that oftentimes we're thinking about, a lot of times us being academic folks who want their students to be successful, we don't think about the other challenges that they're facing with, and a lot of them have imposter syndrome or survivor guilt. They're the only person that has made it out and feeling bad about it, they're feeling awkward in that situation. So, how can instructors respond to like some of the various challenges faced by students, including racism or even the immigration concern?
First thing that comes to mind is to actively listen with empathy. Mentioned getting to know the students, and one of the best ways to do that is to understand your students is to get to know them, and that comes in a lot of different roles. So first, there's like you can take it through academically. So maybe early in the semester, have them write like a 2-page autobiography, and so that just gives you kind of a background knowledge of what they're willing to share. Then you get to know them through office hours, in-class participation, and then if you're able to partner with them outside of class with research. But the kind of way I see it is students are facing these challenges. Ones that Seaburn mentioned. We also have students who face food insecurities, living insecurities, financial insecurity, and just these, just these traumatic circumstances. And so they come to campus. When you look at like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, they're coming to campus without some of the basic things not being met. So I think for us as instructors, in addition to getting to know our students, that we have to take into consideration that it's not all about us. So if the student's not engaging, it may not be about how we are teaching. It might be, don't get me wrong, but it might not be, right? So we got to realize that students have non-educational issues going on in their lives, and they're working through these. And on top of this, different students learn in different ways. Okay, so these are all these dynamics that we can be taking into consideration.
When I taught an ethnic studies class here at the university, I taught a class, an introduction to race, gender, and class. Right? These are social constructs, and we need to talk about them. We need to talk about how they have created the formation of our society, how we relate to each other, how we engage, structures, systems, institutions, and how we are impacted differently based on these social constructs. Right? And so to me, before we even get to that place where we can have this conversation around this, we have to start from a point of entry of what do we need and what are we willing to give in these critical dialogues, right? Where all of the students have an opportunity to share that. And it's a simple 2 post-it situation. They come to class, they have 2 post-its in front of them. What do you need and what are you willing to give? And that creates an opportunity to create some shared norms or agreements around having difficult conversations in the classroom. And that has opened a door for me to be someone that students see as someone they can trust, someone that they find relatable, right? This empathy, right? This notion of being a teacher and an empath at the same time, right? This shifts how we teach, the art and craft of teaching. To me, teaching is about love and loving my students, loving the possibility and the potential that they have, and knowing the resources that are available on campus for these conversations outside of the classroom, right? I may have a lot of experience with immigration, but like Raquel said, all of our immigration stories are different, right? I come from a mixed status family. That means half of my family is documented and the rest is not. That means I have a privilege, and I honor that privilege, and I walk in that privilege, and I know that it carries more responsibility for me, but it's something that we talk about. And I think racism is something that needs to be addressed more than at the individual level, but at the system level, at the institutional level. How are some of our practices and policies maybe burdening our students even more, right? If I get an email about retention, progression, and completion, and it says to me, I'm out of compliance because I've yet to enroll by a certain date, yet the letter does not ask me, are you okay? Are there things that we can do for you? Is there something that you need that you have not yet enrolled, right, in this semester? And so I think it's how do we create that space in the classroom? How do we ask critical questions? And then how do we know our resources that are here available on campus? And we do have amazing resources, undocumented organizations, and being courageous enough as instructors as well to acknowledge these social constructs in our life and how we may be privileged in different ways as well.
Well, try very, very hard not to be the one who is that they feel is instigating the racism and that's step number one. But also to acknowledge, I mean, I have to acknowledge to my students, I have a very, very strong bias against a certain group. Texans. I hate Texas. I hate teaching about Texas. I hate talking about Texas. Texas and in the history of the borderland is a very, very dark history. And I hate Texas. I have to admit it to them. But that's my problem, not theirs. I cannot be, I wish I was this, magical person that was so open and so free of bias that unicorns and rainbows, that ain't me. I have certain, and I have a brother-in-law. I see him as a different ethnicity. So, again, that is, and I can tell you why I feel this way, but starting that notion of, one thing is, because we always want to think that somehow the erasure of
BW, Sheila Clark,
I got Sheila Clark, I got Christopher.
Ashley, Wendy.
Okay, Ashley, who?
So open and so,
Minister?
so again, these are
It only shows their first name.
let's at least cannot meet in
Who
the
else is it?
middle,
Wendy.
open up that discussion,
Wendy.
try to get beyond, and why is it that I have this?
It only has their first name listed.
Is at the very beginning.
I can't remember.
So it is about trying to understand.
I think it is, but she said she was gonna beat you. I
Of
guess.
course, you want to build a better world, but it's not going to be. All we can do is try through openness, conversation, trust, empathy, to get to at least a shared point of discussion. After that, after they go out of the classroom, that then if they want to carry that over into the rest of the world, great. If we're here and now, I can tell you again what I feel strongly about, what I strongly dislike, and we can go from there.
Thank you. I think that's really good. Having that talk about dialogue and so forth. I think that kind of leads into our next question as well too. I think the highlight of this is knowing the resources and also being able to have those open conversations. Sometimes I often joke and say I wish that I like spoofs or parodies because you get a chance to actually like to talk about to address all the stereotypes or your way of thinking about another individual. So kind of thinking about that, what are some of the classroom practices that promote inclusion and diversity thoughts?
Great question. And I think there's several elements leading up to the class. I think, the content that we choose is important, right? So is the content that we're choosing, is it present multiple perspectives? And so I remember my undergraduate degree was in history. And I remember there was a very popular series called Choosing Sides where authors would write opposing sides on the same topic. And I just thought that was so cool as a student because I was like, wow, this is the first time ever in education where I've been presented by two or three or four conflicting views. And there's not one particular right answer. And so I thought that was a great way to learn was to understanding and reading from experts on those diverging views. And then once you get into class and you have that content, well, let's take a look at that content with multiple perspectives, right? So let's make sure our students have a voice to share their perspective. What I often tell them, because we use for instance, in our first year seminar, we use a common reader. And I tell them, it's okay not to like the book. But if you don't like it, I just want you to have an opinion of why you don't like it. Because it's an easy cop out, oh, I didn't like it. But no, have an opinion why you didn't like it. And let us know, because we want to look at it through multiple perspectives. I think it's important for instructors to use a variety of teaching methods. And it was touched on just a moment ago from my colleague, because students, they learn different ways, not just lectures. There's a lot of active learning techniques that we can integrate. There's a flipped classroom technique where you have students break up in groups. they work on a certain topic and then they come to the front and they present it to the class and they're able to put it in words that maybe us as professors may not be able to put it in there. And just really partner with your students. I see a lot of teaching partnership where, let's partner on creating, this environment that promotes thoughtfulness, mutual respect, all in the realm of academics. And obviously that's easier said than done, but really, it's embracing other people's opinions and thoughts. And I had the opportunity when Dr. Marianne Winklemas was here on campus, I had an opportunity to work with her closely on her transparent assignments and the teaching and learning TILT projects. And really, it was really cool how we flipped a lot of assignments over to have three components. Let students know for the assignment, what's the purpose of this assignment? Then explicitly let them know what exactly they need to do, called the task. And then the last part is, what is the criteria for success? And so in other words, how are we going to be measuring this, grading it to where what successful work is going to look like? And the basis of this format, I call it PTC, Purpose, Task, and Criteria for Success. The format of this is, we all know academic language in our field, right? But a lot of first generation students, these terms aren't connecting with them, right? And so let's help level the playing field and make our assignments more easier for our students to understand. And Dr. Winklemas partnered with Dr. Benacki and some other great researchers on campus to measure and found that these assignments did help demystify assignments for their students. And so that was an exciting project. And then also, I think, my last point on this topic, but if you partner with the Service Learning Office, it forces students to get in an environment where they're, as was mentioned earlier, uncomfortable, okay? They might be working with other students or people that they generally don't hang out with. They could be helping an organization that they're usually not affiliated with. And then for all of you that are very practical minded, they do have very good insurance if somebody gets hurt on the service learning project. So don't worry about that part. But anyway, consider adding a service learning component to your class. We've used it in some of ours, and it's been a good experience.
I think one of the questions I ask myself before I even get to the practices is, am I engaging in banking concept of education strategies, right? I would love for every educator to read Paulo Freire and the Pedagogy of the Oppressed. Right? The banking concept of education suggests a teaching model in which we deposit coins of knowledge into our students as if they were empty receptacles. And so I appreciate this conversation about active learning, because my role is then to be a facilitator of a learning experience in the classroom. Right? I can be an expert in the content, yet I also am charged with creating a space where learning can take place in ways that will allow for enduring understanding, that will allow for transfer of skills and content knowledge. And so one of the things that I like to use, it's a resource from the University of Colorado. It's a cultural competency workbook. I'm happy to share this if you all email Sebern. And it has an opportunity for students to use something that I like to call concentric circles, or they call concentric circles. So students engage in an active process of authentic conversation with each other by acknowledging some of their identities, some of the things that are interesting to them, some of the things that make them who they are, and just have a dialogue. And so I think bringing that authenticity into the classroom and creating that space, but also integrating content questions in it, right? So it can be fun, it can be exploratory about each other, but it's also about how we relate to the content, how we interact with this. So for me, the key words are critical pedagogy and critical literacy. Teaching the students how to read the word and the world through whatever content we're teaching. Right? Because if I open a textbook, I used to teach social studies when I was a high school teacher, and we would look at a book with a title called World History. But when we opened the text of World History, our first task was to put a post-it in every page that you could find a woman that was acknowledged in the text. Right? So we had one color for women, and then we had another color for people of color. Right? And at the end of it, the students said, well, how could this be the book of the world story when so many other people's stories are absent from it? And so really, having students think deeply about even information that's being presented to them. I love when students push back in the classroom, because that is when the real learning is happening. right? When they're feeling that tension with what they knew, with these new funds of knowledge and making meaning out of it. And so activities like Four Corners, Forced Choice, moving us around in the classroom, that's important. It's key to learning. Inviting students to consider that learning can be fun, right? That's the biggest aha moment they have in my class. Wow, we're having fun and you're having fun with us. And also my ability to just step out of my role and be funny, have fun, do call and response. I make a very impromptu mic and I turn it on like, reporting live from Conejo, Profesora's classroom. And we have creative formative assessments that allow for student creativity to show up in the classroom. So to me, that is essential for these practices that allow for diversity.
And in teaching history, the ability to be very, very untraditional. So what I always do is I will lecture one session, but then the following session, I assign them roles that they have to take on, and they have to investigate further either through our readings or on their own, and then they break them into groups and they compete against each other. So how are they understanding the role of Native Americans, Texas, California, New Mexico, and students and assigning them roles? But they have to explain from as they understand it, and then I can see where I'm missing, or not explaining properly. But it also makes them think in historical ways, and makes them think very critical. So especially if I always make the men become women, and the women have the freedom to choose. But forcing them to think beyond themselves in historical fashion, so that we can understand the motivations and engage with other groups to understand that historical moment. What does a frontier look like from the perspective of the colonial settlers versus the indigenous? When does it break out into violence? When does it in fact create engagement and alliances? Who is really powerful in these moments? So again, it forces them to take the information and for them to digest and then to articulate it back to me. And that I find it far more inclusive and active than sitting through 2 days of lecture when if they're not interested, I cannot, unless I can go beat them, I cannot get them to that. So trying to get them out of their comfort zone and to say, okay, no, it's not about you pleasing me and just checking off the, okay, I attended, I took notes, I read, so what does it mean? If you cannot get to the, this is what I think it means, then I'm not teaching. So for me, trying to get them to be more engaged, the best thing about history is, okay, so go interview your family. You're going to find out who you are. Then go and interview and talk to your relatives and tell me what within your family, how your family reaches this place. Tell me your history. So that anybody can be a historian. For me, that's when they you love history and half, 3/4 of no, it's like it is the easiest subject in the world. It is literally the easiest subject in the world. How did you get here? That's history. So again, the subject matter I think helps me. But it is about breaking away from what they have been taught. The series of memorization, names, dates, remembering the great men of history. So in a lot of ways, I have the ability to make it into a playground of ideas, but they are the central actors. When students come to me, what do you want? I have everything I want. I have everything I need to. I know what I know. You're the one that has to be. And so it's not what I want, it's what do you have to work for. And for me, just expressing an interest in the past in order to get us to know the present, that's all I want.
Very good on that too, especially I know we had a workshop through Ryan Saddlewater, he's the director of service learning and leadership here on campus. So please, if you do need some tips on including service learning into your classes, you can definitely speak with him. But and love the banking method once again on that. So with that too, though, especially when we talk about just how students sometimes view us as the oppressor, more so. And we know through the content, like the best way for us to break those walls, to actually get down right with the students, to get with the oppressed group at that point, to learn together. So we still sometimes face, our own biases, and I often tell people that, that it's just something that you just can't totally wipe out and get rid of. But knowing that there are biases, how do you navigate implicit bias in the classroom?
Thanks, Seaburn. Appreciate it. I think first I'll talk about the instructor standpoint, and it's been highlighted earlier. Understanding our biases, and really taking time to reflect on those. And so there's a lot of self-reflection involved, but also being aware of different elements that have an impact. So I came across this quote from Dr. Rushi Ragnath she's a professor of education at the University of San Francisco. And I thought she had this kind of opened some eyes when she said, racial and implicit bias is inherent in our classrooms. Our classroom walls, the expectations we set for our students, our body language, how we connect with families, what resources are available, what resources we choose or not choose to recommend, what we choose to say or not say. All of this gives students a clear message about how we feel about them. And so I thought about that quote, and I'm like, wow, there's a lot of elements that send that message, right? So I think self-reflection is really important to reflect. And then also peer teaching observations, right? There could be something that have blind spots to, right? So if I have a colleague come in, they can point that out, or hopefully we can have that conversation to help. And then talking about the students, right? The students have implicit biases, right? So I found that that students, the more they get to know each other in the class, it helps to decrease and break down at least some of those, right? Because our students are from diverse backgrounds. And so I think them learning from each other, and Dr. Doris Watson does this really cool assignment where it's like a classmate scavenger hunt, and she has a lot of awesome assignments for students getting to know each other. But I think once they get to know each other, they understand more about each other's backgrounds, their political views, religious views, and other types of areas. And so you can start to see some cool things develop in the classroom. Now, obviously, some of you may say, well, that sounds great, Dan, but you teach first year seminar, we're supposed to be 25 or less students, right? So some of you are working with large lecture halls, right? Which is very challenging. And so, I have seen professors find ways to break students into groups, find like mini labs, or group into, if it's a large classroom, and do those exercises that way. Obviously, it's more difficult in a large lecture hall, but there's a lot of opportunity there.
When I say implicit, you say bias. Implicit. We all have it, right? And so I think starting my day one with my positionality and standpoint slide, like where do I stand? What are some of my beliefs? Very much like Raquel, I'm very honest with my students about my personal preferences, because bias doesn't have to be negative, right? It's a preference. It's something that we have experienced, that we enjoy, or that it's just comfortable and familiar. And so again, this is where we talk about language and what does it mean. So going back to Dan's point about perspective taking, it might just be simply having a debate and asking students to talk about your favorite flavor of ice cream. Now I want you to think of all the arguments of why this is your favorite flavor. And now the debate comes up, and now you're going to argue for the other side, right? You're going to argue for completely different flavor. And it could be on the content area as well, right? This is just a simplified example, but how to be able to take perspective on the spot, right? How to be able to acknowledge this is an area I'm still exploring, I'm still learning, I'd like to kind of know more about. Another thing, and I appreciate this notion of critical reflection as an instructor. Who am I calling on in the classroom? Who is raising their hand the most, right? And what am I doing and how can I shift what I'm doing in the classroom to ensure that all voices are heard? And so in a small classroom that looks like, just like a little tool where I say the student initiated a comment, the student responded, right? It's just a simple, like some sort of a graph, right? Because most of my classes, we do sit in circles, but in a large lecture hall, it's different. And so how do we engage in other practices, think, pair, share, these other opportunities, passing note cards, 3 students to the right, 3 students to the left, to ask these kind of critical conversations about preference, our positionality, and our personal standpoint. Because they're important, and we're gonna have to navigate how to share space in a classroom with those differences.
Yeah, in a large lecture room, I think that's real active, obviously diminishes. Am I really listening? Am I really listening to the student? Because again, nothing turns you off. It turns a student off more than because of that's my position of power. Am I listening to not just the voices but also the body language? And am I going and how much interest am I going to be not on the ones that are here, that are on the periphery who are choosing to sit there and choosing to navigate this classroom and me in different ways. So it's listening not just to what they say, that body language. I know when students are resistant to me. And I, in the course of a semester, politely or not so politely, let them know that how they're navigating the course is not going to work because they're going to have to. It's not just about showing up and taking notes. It's about really engaging. And so therefore, am I listening to all of the cues that I can gather as I lecture? And then again, they always think that if they sit in the back, I don't see them. Well, I see when they're doing this, and I'm seeing. So it's like, again, am I really listening? And when I can intervene and make them, you can keep doing that, but it's not a good way to be a student. And so if you do not have the courtesy of putting your phone away when I told you, then we're going to have discussions. But again, always, rather than trying to lecture and go the direction of information and contact cannot just be me or them. They're also sending energy and vibes, and I have to be aware. And how I negotiate that differs from student to student. It's easier in small classrooms, but I can also do that in big classrooms. Because again, the kid in the back that's snoring, that's an easy thing to have to deal with. But I do have to take responsibility that I am the one that has to and be the most active. And yeah, I wish lectures could be just me reading my notes and saying now bye, but it isn't. It's about that eye contact. It's about knowing that when a student is acting differently halfway through the semester, what happened? Am I going to take the time to ask? So again, am I always listening through more than just my ears?
All right, so our last question that we have, and I think we kind of touched on it a little bit with some of the different activities. I know for myself, my argumentation debate class, I take that same approach. I learn what students' likes and dislikes are early on, what they feel really strongly about, and I'll create a topic off of it, and I'll make them debate the complete opposite side. So someone tells me that they're an animal lover, then I'll make them argue almost against, like very limited animal rights and so forth, So, but what it does, it makes us have those difficult conversations in the classroom as well to see the different side. So just with that, what are some of the strategies, this is be our last question, kind of short on time, but what are some of the strategies for initiating and managing classroom activities that ask students and instructors to engage in those difficult dialogues?
we all know the challenges, that occur when we address difficult or, maybe even controversial topics. Some students get real quiet and shut down. Some students try to dominate the conversation. Some get overly upset and possibly dramatic. And so we've kind of all probably had similar, one of those scenarios occur. And, it kind of comes to mind, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And so I think early on, before you engage in these, first set your expectations for the class. Okay, so you need to provide them a clear format and guidelines. So for instance, if you're doing a debate, let them know how much time each groups have, how long they're going to have their rebuttal, let them know the format, and then all the guidelines. We talked about the expectations of mutual respect already. And then it's okay to remind them throughout the class of the expectations. And then maybe even before we talked about us as instructors reflecting on our biases, maybe even before you engage in this debate or whatever type of discussion, give them a few minutes to reflect on that themselves. Maybe have them write like a quick one-paragraph journal that they keep just to themselves, reflecting on their bias. That's something you can do. And then during the actual discussion, you kind of undertake the role as the facilitator. And so at times, some students are going to need some support, right? They're not speaking up, or you can see some insecurity in their opinion, and they need you to back them up like, yes, that's an excellent point. And also, could you expand on that? Because that's really an outstanding point. And that sometimes, as we talked about, some students, you might need to challenge them a little bit for what they say. Like, well, have you thought about this? Or, well, you mentioned that. Here's something to actually consider. And one of my colleagues, Dr. Joe Urban, he had to go to meet with a student. He told me he's going to leave early, but he draws this cool diagram in his class. And he literally he says, I have to revert to stick figures because I'm not an artist, but he draws stick figures, and he has like these motions going up above them, right? And so he talks to the students, say, these are two people that are having a difficult discussion, but they're furthering the academic thought and working towards the truth in this conversation. Notice how these are up here separate from each other. They're not going towards each other, which could be considered an attack, right? So in other words, we draw on the diagram. So if somebody has a thought, right, and if you're going to discuss that, we should not, address them personally. We should address that thought, right? So all of our and so essentially, he draws that diagram to help, because a lot of our students are very visual. It kind of gets that conversation going. And so I love switching the topics, make them, as several point out, arguing the opposite side. And one way that the students, sometimes they can see that coming. Like, so they don't want to tell you which side they're on. I actually, have them like write something out supporting their side, and then you got them, and then you have to switch. And so that's because sometimes they see it coming and they act like they're the other way, so that way they can present their side. So that's a little nuance that I add to that. And, just modeling these qualities as instructors, obviously easier said than done. But I think all too often we've all had professors that, I hate to say it, but they force their opinion upon you. And so if we can model that, acknowledging to our students, hey, this is my opinion. Some of you might have a different perspective, and that's fine. This is my opinion. And then helping them with that critical thinking, separating fact from opinion, and just letting them know the content they're reading isn't always right. And professors, we're not perfect. We're not always right. And so some things to let them know.
I like to start with the story of your name. What is the story of your name? As an exercise to develop trust in the classroom. And so students have 60 seconds to share the story of their name while the other students are actively listening. And in this active listening, those that are not speaking are seeking to clarify, confirm, or to ask questions about anything that they think they heard. And then the other student has an opportunity to confirm what was shared back with them. And so this creates a sense of mindfulness in the classroom. It creates a sense of humanizing each other in this experience. And also, it reminds me that I need to, and I think I've shared this before, create a shared set of agreements, but it's co-constructed, right? So the students are the ones who are telling me what we need in this classroom to have these dialogues and conversations. And when we talk about immigration, we talk about the word illegal. And what does this word mean? How does it dehumanize others? How is it different from undocumented? How the power of language to just shut down conversation, but also to open the door for it is really important to explore. And I think often about, am I also creating opportunities for students with alternate abilities in my classroom, right? Students with disabilities, students with different learning preferences, how do I open that space as well for those conversations? Talking sticks can work, right? So having something that acknowledges when the person has the mic. So we used to use a mic check in my class. And as well as ensuring that those shared expectations include something like knowing when to land the plane. It means get to the point, right? Knowing when to lean in, when to step back, when to allow others' voices to be heard as well. And so that comes with just facilitating practice. And there's a lot of strategies that we can share afterwards that could be helpful for everyone.
You know how there are no stupid questions? Yeah, there are no stupid questions, but there are a lot of stupid answers. And I am the final arbitrator of if somebody goes beyond stupid. And I need to assure every student that we can have difficult dialogue. And as long as it is a conversation, but once it gets into unreasonable, hateful speech, action, and word and thought, then I do become the arbitrator. No, and we can discuss why it's, but students have to be aware that bad actions, bad thoughts, it has to be called. I mean, I wish I could say that, oh, you know, and especially in history, given how horrific people have treated each other in the past. But no, there are limits. There are, and we as a community have to, and if one person steps over that line as a community, but especially as the professor, as the one trying to facilitate, you have to say, no, and this is why, and to use and to repeat it, and especially if I have to explain, I'll explain it to you once, but if it continues, you are now choosing to be the disruptor and not be in dialogue. If you want to be part of this community and have these tough, I'm open to anything. Again, I am a historian. There is nothing that we have come up with. There's nothing new under the sun. We can talk about any and everything. But if it's done in a way that is markedly offensive, just for the sake of offense, that is not. And so I need to be the one to say what are the boundaries, and then I will hope that if you do say something so offensive that you are, and again, it's not like soccer. You don't get 2 yellow cards. I go directly to red. So I will be open, but if it goes outside what I feel is constructive dialogue, then we will have to have a discussion either in private or in public. They are adults. They are adults, and they can take that hard. They can take, again, no, it varies, but I think students need to know that when they feel attacked and they feel that the center of unnecessary criticism, that the professor is there trying to create support. And if you're honest with the students about what your intentions and biases are, then that's the one thing that is the power of the team. I get to set the rules, and I get to uphold them. I just promise you that it's not going to be arbitrary. It's not going to be unfair. But there are certain things that I think are off limits in civilized conversation. And if you have not understood, if you don't know them, I will gladly explain to you after class. But in this classroom, everyone has. And so that's where again, I wish I could create that beautiful cotton candy cloud. Sometimes you've got to slap them on the hand a little.
Stephen, can I ask something real quick?
Yes.
I just wanted to say that classroom set of agreements, all the students sign that, and I roll it up and I take it to class every week, right? It's something visible. If the conversation goes to a way that feels disrespectful, we just go back to our signed agreement that we all signed. And also we acknowledge that we need to privilege impact over intent, right? And the impact may be how the receiver of the message felt it, and someone may be triggered. And so how do we privilege impact over intent?
Well, thank you all. We've finished our time. I feel bad because I definitely would like to, if people have questions, definitely ask any questions. But for those that I know we said it's going to be until 1 o'clock. It is 1:05. So for those that need to leave now, we definitely thank you for coming as well too. And if anybody has any questions, please feel free to ask any of our panelists any questions.
Great work.
This one should be an hour.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
And I probably should have cut one of them. They're also.
Oh, yeah, they're all good. Yeah, they're all good questions.
Could have planted the questions in the audience.
Oh, yeah.
We could have planted the questions, like give someone else. the
Oh, yeah.
Thanks so much for coming. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, my pleasure. Oops.
Love it.
Thank you.